Very nice. Thank you so very much. Junior high, senior high. This is your opportunity. Today I'll be concluding the series on Jesus Said, and Josh will be preaching next Sunday. So everyone take note of that. The last thing that after the resurrection and all that had transpired and was going to take place, Jesus would say he would meet them in Galilee. We'll cover that in just a minute, but he would say, "Feed my sheep, feed my sheep." So that's our final sermon in this series. Have you ever failed? You ever failed at something? Well, of course you have. We've all failed at something sometime or another. Maybe you failed a class. Most of us don't like to admit if we've ever failed a class that we took at some point or another, but we thought we had this, and sure enough, we didn't. Or maybe it was a project that you were on or something at work. Maybe you failed in a relationship, or failed with your parents, or failed with your kids. All of those are possibilities. Perhaps you failed in marriage. Maybe you just feel that you yourself have failed. Or maybe it's just been a personal failure, something in your life where it's just fallen apart. You know, now some people seem to be able to handle failure pretty well, and it's happened and they just move on. I admire those people. They're able to put it behind them and then move forward. Others, well, they'll act like they're over it, but then they'll stew on it, and every once in a while something to trigger it. We're all aware of people like that. And then there's just others who just never get over something. Failure can affect our self-esteem, and it can affect our self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness. And that affects our daily lives. And whenever our daily lives are affected, we have issues. Now, I have to personally guard against failures. I personally have to be one of those that if I'm not careful, I'll find that I'll stew on something, or that I'll let it beat me up. Last week, I got a Mel Brooks instead of a Mel Gibson, you know. And I've thought about it all week. I cannot imagine Mel Brooks as a Jesus for nothing. But I had a redeeming factor. See, if you look, there's always a redeeming factor. I did not forget the words to the national anthem during the World Series. That's all I can say. So sometimes we have our moments and they're really tough. You know, sometimes when we have those moments, failure can cause us to think, why bother to try? I've already messed up. Is there anyone? Never mind, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I can think of two of you that will. Anyone ever feel like you've just never messed up? Well, of course you have. Put your hand down. So we all have. You know, we've made those mistakes. But we shouldn't develop that attitude then, why try? I've already messed this up. I can't go any farther. Or maybe we think, you know, they'd be better off without me. Once in a while we'll go through those emotions as well. You know, they'd just be so much better off without me. Don't get your hopes up, folks. I'm not going anywhere. But we get those feelings going through our mind. Or we have this fear that we'll never be able to get over it. This fear of another relationship, or a fear of rejection. Rejection's a tough fear that we have to go through. Most of us have suffered that at some time or another, where we think they'll never forgive me, or they'll reject me. I can't go there because I'm not accepted by that group. I went to my high school class reunion, my 25th. That was the last one I was to, but I've only had 26. No, that's not true. But I went to my 25th class reunion, and I was dreading it with a passion. And you know, there was 2 or 3 of those guys, they did remind me of who I used to be. There's no doubt. I expected that. But they also kind of welcomed me back in. So I was surprised. And I was so fearful of rejection that it was going to take place. Of course, I drove a Corvette to my 25th anniversary. I just want to tell you that. Just to show them, you know, not everything about me changed. So now if we feel that way, and every one of you feel that way, every one of us have at some time or another, whether you like it or whether you don't, you just have that fear because I failed. I failed at whatever it was. Now, if you feel that way, consider how Peter must have felt. How terrible it must have been for Peter. His failure was threefold. He didn't just mess up. He messed up all in one evening. It was pretty traumatic. And within a rooster's crow of Jesus. Because Jesus said before that rooster crows, you're going to mess up. Now, if I feel this way, here's a guy who had spent 3 years of intensified learning, intensified training under Jesus. And he had to be thinking, what have I done? Is it all over? Will there be any opportunity to serve? What have I done? Can I ever be trusted? Can I ever trust myself? Well, today we're going to look at some of that. First thing we're going to talk about is a time of reflecting, because I think that's the first thing Peter went through, was a time of reflecting. John chapter 2 verses 21 verses 3 and 4. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning Jesus stood on the shore but the disciples did not realize that it was him. Jesus has, we're going to get to the scripture in a minute, but he's told them where he's going to meet them, where we're going to go. Now Peter, I believe it's a time of reflecting for him. He gets out in the boat that night. He takes off his outer robe, and he's there in his gym shorts. You figure that out for yourself. He's there in his gym shorts. Kick back. The fish aren't biting. It's probably a hot evening on the Sea of Galilee. And he's kicked back. And I can't help but think that he's reflecting about all that has gone on, all that has happened. It's all behind them. There's been the garden. There was that Passover supper first. And in the Passover supper, he had sat there with Jesus, maybe very close. And he had heard Jesus say, this cup represents my blood, and this loaf represents my body. And he thought, what is he talking about? But he was familiar with the Passover, and he understood a little bit what was going to take place. And then after that Passover meal, and of course Judas is gone, and he's hearing Jesus do some final instruction, final teaching, all the way to the garden. And then when they get to the garden, here's Peter. Of course, Peter is kind of in the inner circle, and he said, come, I want you three to come with me. And they went a little farther, and Jesus said, stay here and pray. Watch and pray with me. Jesus knew, he could feel the pressure of the cross already. And lo and behold, what happened? He fell asleep. Well, the other two did as well, but he fell asleep there. See, we can look at his three denials in the courtyard, but I want you to think about the first one that he may be suffering from. What if I'd been praying? Could this have been changed? You ever had anyone say, would you pray for me? And then you didn't? Or you get that call on the prayer chain and think, I'll get back to that, and you don't. This was kind of the prayer chain. And Jesus said, I want you three to pray extra. We've got the others over there praying, but I want you to pray. I feel a companionship to you, a closeness. And they went to sleep. So he remembers that experience in the garden. He remembers the cross. Oh, he followed them. He's thinking about following Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. He's standing there by the fire that is burning. It's a chilly evening, and he's standing there warming himself. And you were with him. Not me, lady. What are you talking about? Oh, man, what have I just done? He's reflecting on all of these moments. All that has transpired and all that is taking place. And then it would happen again and again, and boom, the rooster crows. What do you think Peter just did? Oh, I think he just lost every ounce of strength that he had, because it has all come full circle. And then we watched as they put him on a cross and then in a tomb. He was in the upper room when Jesus would come back and say, Thomas, see my hands? Go ahead. Put your fingers here. Peter was there for all of it. I think he's reflecting on all of these things that have happened. So him and 6 others now, him and 6 other of the disciples, they've gone to the Sea of Galilee. What are they doing? They're fishing. reflecting, gathering their thoughts about the past 3 years of all that has been filled and all that they have seen. They're seeing the hope. Can you imagine what it was first like whenever Andrew came and said, "Come, I found the Messiah." They were all looking for hope. And they found this hope in Jesus. And as they listened to Jesus, he was a master teacher. Oh, what a thrill it was to listen to him. As they would listen to him talk about the Father, and others would say he taught with authority, like he really knew. That he knew better than all the rest. With such authority he would speak. Oh, we found this hope. And at his baptism there was a dove that would descend down. Oh, what hope has started to generate within them. But now there's a time of caution. Because there's this guy named John the Baptist who's going to lose his head. And now we get a little cautious about where we're going. And then the next thing, maybe the amazement. They've just seen the feeding of the 5,000 or the 4,000 or the 20,000 or however how many there were at that particular time of the feeding of the people. They've listened to Jesus once again as he said, "Sit down and listen." And they've sat and they've listened, and he passes out the food. They were there whenever he stepped out of the boat. Oh, what amazement. This guy walks on water. They were so amazed. And then they think about the things that he'd learned in reflecting. Now, so far, each one of these we can do. You can think about the hope that you had when you first come to Jesus. Oh, the hope that just filled me so much. A hope that I'd never had in my life till I met the Lord. And he just filled my life. But then I got cautious with it, thinking, I don't know, is this a walk for me? Is this something I can do? Then I'll become amazed at the things that I would see and hear that Jesus had done. And then learning. I love to learn about the Savior. I love to learn about Jesus. I read about him every day, every week. There's something that I'll find that just brings a new revelation to me about him. Can you imagine the revelation of the disciples as they sat around the fire in the evening and Jesus said, now this is what that particular parable meant. Wow! And their eyes were opened. Like they'd never been opened before. You ever had one of those wow moments? Whenever the Word of God just all of a sudden you thought, I know what that means. And it's so powerful. Powerful. And now they're anticipation. Now they're anticipating what he had told them. See, back in Matthew chapter 26, verse 32, this is what we only know as Jesus predicts Peter's denial. But in verse 32 it says, but after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Boom! All of a sudden this says something to me that I hadn't heard before. All I'd heard before is that before the rooster crows you're going to deny me. Not me! But now, what else did he say? He would say, after he has risen, he's going to go to Galilee and wait for us there. Now, if you've heard that and you've seen all those other things that we've listed, where are you going? Buddy, I'm catching the next train to Galilee. And that's what they did. They went to Galilee. The disciples are in Galilee. They're anticipating seeing the Lord. Their faith has taken them there with such great anticipation. A time of reflecting. Every one of us, we have times of reflecting. Whenever we've made that mistake, whenever we've failed, whenever we've sinned, whenever we've fallen down, we picked ourselves up, there's two ways to handle that. We either pick ourselves up and move forward and we start reflecting. You know, Jesus has done all of this in my life. Or we turn our back on it and walk away and we're a failure from there on. It becomes our choice. So the next thing that's going to happen is Jesus knows that's a possibility for Peter. Peter, I believe, is one of his mainstays in the disciples. Now, I know all of you like Paul best. I like Peter. I associate with this guy. He's just rough. He's tough. He's unpolished. His name should have been Mike. There's no doubt in my mind. I look in the mirror and Peter sees me. That's kind of how it's working. You know, I understand that. I understand that ruggedness. I got real soft hands anymore, but they used to not be. I understand that stuff. Yeah, I can understand whenever Peter said, let's just take care of business. I understand that. I used to have that about me. I'm not that way anymore. You grow out of things. But here's Peter. Now, lo and behold, he's got to face all of this in his reflection. And Jesus knew that. So Jesus said, let's have a time of question and answer. John chapter 21, once again, verses 15 through 17. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. The questions, now everyone has related. If you read a commentary, they're all going to tell you that there's 3 times that Jesus forgives him, 3 times that he questions him because he denied for 3 times. The questions that Jesus are asking Peter are quite simply, do you love me? And the first one is, do you love me more than these? Now there's a couple ways to look at these. One you've probably not been challenged with, but I want to challenge you with it today. The first one that you can look at, do you love me more than these? Where are they at? Well, they've just gotten out of the boat. Peter swam ahead. He just jumped out and saw Jesus on the shore and went up there. Then he went back and helped pull 153 fish in. What's that 153 mean? Depends on which commentary you read. To me, it just sounds like a lot of fish. So you go with whatever you want to go with. But anyway, they've pulled the fish in. And now Jesus is there. And you got Peter, once again, he had put on his outer garment, probably out of respect to the Lord. Now Jesus is standing there, and visualize this with me. Here's Peter, awestruck. Everything has just come to pass that Jesus had said. He's in Galilee with us. And Jesus goes, Peter, do you love me more than these? And as he waved his arm around, there's the boat. And here's the fish. And there's my fishing crew. Where did Peter come from before he went with Jesus? He was at a boat. He had a fishing business. He had a crew. Had his own group of fishermen. And they were out doing this work. And lo and behold, maybe Jesus has said, what about these things? Do you love me more than these things? Now, that's just a possibility. There's another one. But I want to ask you today, do we love Jesus more than things in our life? See, whenever Peter failed, where did he end up? He ended up back in his comfort zone. His comfort zone. Whenever we fail, where do we go to? We usually find a comfort zone to try to ease ourselves. Peter ended up back in the comfort zone. He said, do you love me better than this way of life? Do you love me more than this family? How much do you love me? So whenever we fail, most of us, and you have done this as well, you find a comfort zone and you kind of crawl into it. We all have them. Someplace where we're really comfortable. Where do you lose yourself? What do you lose yourself in doing? Well, I read the other day where this statistic frightened me, but I think I've got it right. I said I'm a 5%er. Now what's a 5%er? According to this statistic that come out, all but 5% of the men in America look at pornography. So where's your comfort zone? Well, that's certainly not mine. I'm a 5%er. I'm in the 5% that don't. And I don't care to announce that to you. That's not an issue. I will tell you that whenever I look for a comfort zone, I may end up on the internet, but it's usually called Ford Motor Company. All right? And with Ford Motor Company, they may be wearing red or black or blue, but they're called Fords. This is an advertisement for everyone watching me. Yeah, right. Or I may end up on Craigslist punching in 1970 to see what's there. That's a comfort zone for me. I can go back to those old cars and I can just relive. My greatest comfort zone is I go back to American Graffiti. I've watched that show just short of 500 million times. We've worn out a couple discs, and I like to watch it. So I can end up right back, 1962, cruising down the boulevard. Yeah, it's nice. We all have our comfort zone. Don't find one of those bad comfort zones. But whenever we go back there, our trouble starts when we stay there. Now, Peter's back in his comfort zone, and Jesus said, do you love me more than these? Was he talking about these things? Or was he talking about what had happened earlier? This is what most people believe. Do you love me more than these other disciples? Matthew chapter 26, verses 31 through 35 will say this. Then Jesus told them, this very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. These other disciples, they all said the same. But Peter said, I'm not going to fall away no matter what these other disciples do. Now, can you imagine how that made them feel? That wasn't too good a feeling. All of a sudden, he's saying, I have more faith than they do, even if everyone else falls away. Overconfident. You ever question yourself about your actions? You ever got so overconfident and you think, what was I thinking? That's where Peter's at. That's where Peter's at. And finally, it was a time of instruction. We're going to go back to the same chapter, 21, verses 15 through 17 once again. And in that passage, you'll remember he said, feed my lambs was the first thing. And the second one was feed my sheep. Jesus knew that Peter was hurting, ashamed, and very uncomfortable at this point. Jesus knew all of that about Peter. So Jesus knows the importance of getting him out of that fishing comfort zone and getting him back in. So Jesus renews Peter's commission. His instructions are clear, very clear. It's show me that you love me. Now, folks, that's not about deeds. He says, provide proper food and care for the sheep. It's not about works. It's about showing your love. Putting your love for Jesus in action. Peter has just said, I love you. Lord, I love you. You know that I love you. And Jesus just quite simply said, well, show me. Don't just be giving me lip service. Show me. Get over yourself. Come back. And our instructions are the same. And we call ours the Great Commission. To go and preach and teach and baptize and teach. Matthew chapter 28. The Great Commission. Our commission is the same. Our commission is just like that of Peter's. Now, why is ours so similar? Because we've all fallen. We've all failed. We've all made mistakes. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And he said, show me. Teach, baptize, and teach. Teach, baptize, and teach. We cannot get over that responsibility. Here's the good news. The good news is very simple. Jesus doesn't a single time chastise Peter. He opens his arms and welcomes him. So for all of us who openly admit to Jesus that we have failed, he opens his arms and loves me and brings me close. In essence, he is telling his disciples, and this particular disciple, It's time to move forward. It's time to move forward. We have all failed at some point in this journey that we call life. Now get this. Failure may not be your biggest problem. That failure, we've all done that. That may not be your biggest problem. Your biggest failure may be your failure to move forward. Your failure to move forward. Instead of just sitting there having pity upon yourself. Barclay would write, rise up out of your self-pity and take on the life to which God has called you. Rise up out of your self-pity and take on the life to which God has called you. Wow, isn't it easy to sit back and say, woe is me, I've messed up, no one's going to like me. I feel that way every week after my sermon. Oh, well, they won't want me back next week. Well, it's not like I've quit, so here I am. Every week we wrestle with something. Every week we may say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Yeah, well, rise up out of your self-pity. As I said, Jesus didn't chastise Peter, he welcomed him. He stretched out his arms and welcomed him. And he said one thing, and that one thing applies to each one of us. Tend my flock. That's not a preacher assignment. That's a Christian assignment. That's a Christian assignment. I'm so blessed by the ladies' ministry of taking care of the dinners. Mary Catherine Perry, I've talked to her and how wonderful she was blessed by the church here. What a blessing it was. She's talked to Don and told him the same thing of how the church stepped up to minister to her in their time of loss. See, it's not just preacher, tend my flock. It's Christian, tend my flock. Christian, tend my flock. Our Wednesday night Bible study group and the ladies' Sunday school class, they send out cards. I can't begin to tell you how many people have said, I've received 2 cards a week for the last year. If that's what it took, that's what they've done. I don't know, that's pretty neat when you go to the mailbox and know that sometime this week I'm going to hear from a church family. I had a woman not long ago say, you know, I've been so blessed that there's 3 of the women in your church that have been calling me. I don't know who you are, ladies, but thank you so very much. They've been calling me. They know that I'm home and they've been calling me. That's a pretty neat testimony, folks. It says, take care of my flock. Minister to one another. Peter, would he be the lead minister? He will at first. Silver and gold I don't have, but what I have in the name of Jesus arise and walk. And then this guy come along called Paul. And we don't hear a lot about Peter after that. So did he quit? No, he just wasn't the one doing the writing. He stayed the course. Tradition says that he died on a cross upside down. That's strictly Catholic tradition. But the point of the matter is, he got up out of his self-pity and took on the cross that Jesus had for him. For any of you who haven't failed, I tip my hat to you. But for all the rest of us, get over yourself. Move forward. All right? Will you please stand as we have our invitation?